I'm rebuilding these calipers for my 1997 Lexus LX450, an 80 series Land Cruiser, and I ran into a bit of a snag following the factory manual actually, so I think I'll just share this with you guys. And I've always said the best way to master something is to learn from other people's mistakes, so maybe you can learn from my mistakes and moving forward do a better job the first time. So these are pages I printed right out of the factory manual. So your first steps here are putting the seal in here, the piston seal, and then pushing the piston in, and then it suggests that you should install the cylinder boot and set its ring. Now this is where I ran into some problems. You see this animated fellow here, he's just jamming a screwdriver in there, and not the best technique. It's a really fragile seal, and I damaged mine and kind of took a minute and thought, okay, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way to do this. Subsequently I had to rebuy the seals I already bought, so I'm hoping I can save you that headache. So if we do it as per the manual, this is that piston seal. You kind of massage it in there. Hopefully I'm all in view of the camera. Yeah, so you get that in there, and then it's suggesting you take your piston. I use new pistons, and you pop that in. Okay. And then you take your dust boot, some people would call it, and you work it around the lip of the piston. And now, see, there's this lip there, and it has a groove. You got to jam it in, and so the manual suggests you use a screwdriver, or from the looks of it. I actually took the time, and I had this old Craftsman screwdriver, and I ground it to be a little bit more blunt and polished it with some 800 grit sandpaper, because I expected this to be rough on the seal. So anyhow, you start pushing it in, and pretty soon I think you'll find you tear it or poke a hole in it, and it's really not a good way. Or you'll get 90% of the way around, and when you come to this back side, it's a real fight. So I'll show you an easier way to get this dust boot on. These are the damaged ones, and then I'll show you how to rebuild the whole caliper. So there's two ways to get this piston out. The first way would be remove the pads and maybe pull the caliper off and get someone to depress the brake and push the piston out. The other way is remove it from the truck, close the bleeder, and then if you have access to compressed air, you pump some air in there and it'll push the piston out. Now it comes out pretty hot if you're not careful, or quick, for people that maybe don't know my lingo. So it comes out pretty quick, so you got to make sure you have a hand on it, otherwise you're going to shoot this thing across the shop. One thing that's really important to talk about is the grease you're going to use here. So especially on these seals around the piston, in the 80 series manual, this is an earlier manual, so I think it's printed in 92. Anyhow, this manual says you want to use lithium soap-based glycol grease to the following parts, which is all the parts. The point of the matter is this lithium soap-based glycol grease is what you want to use on the piston. And the rebuild kit comes with kind of a joke. It's almost a sample. In my opinion, it's not enough to even do one, especially if you have to grease the sliders with it. So I'd really recommend you go to your dealer and buy yourself a tube. But I think this was $26 Canadian, which is quite a bit, but I mean, I think it's worth the money for the peace of mind knowing you're not going to ruin your seals and have a brake failure. See if I can find a part number on here. One thing I can tell you on this project is grease is your friend. You want to grease everything. It just makes putting it together way easier. You're less likely to damage these things if they go in nice and slick. So this is the piston seal. I'm going to give it a little coat of grease. And then get it in its home. Not too tricky, but there's definitely a bit of a technique to it. Yep, now I'm just struggling here, naturally, trying to keep it in focus. There you go. So pop that seal in. And here's the big trick, if you want to call it that. Take your piston and give it some lube, a little bit of that grease. Okay. Get a nice coating. The new seal, these are the ones I damaged over here. And this lip, you can see that lip there. It's got to seat itself in this groove right here. So it doesn't hurt to give it a bit of lubrication with this grease and work it in, work it around. And now we're going to diverge from the Toyota manual, so all the Toyota purists out there, you know, hold on, because it's about to get intense. So take your piston, put your seal over, and your dust boot grabs this ridge here, so you're actually going to want to pull it past that ridge. You know, be careful not to damage it. I'm getting a little rough here. It's hard to keep it in the camera for you guys, but so you've pulled it past, see? So this will fold up and live in there. Now you're gonna drag the seal past just enough so that skirt sits proud of the piston just a bit. Just like that. Okay? And now it's as easy as laying this on there and working your finger around it, and that seal, that skirt, will pop right into its home really easily, because it doesn't have to fight its way past the piston, and you don't have to go poking at it with a screwdriver that much. A little bit, you know, like just help it out, but with the other technique, you're just stabbing at it and it doesn't work very good. So I'm not sure how well you guys can see that, but you know, it's seated. So now you can go ahead, work your piston in, and as the piston comes down, the dust boot will seal in there. Boop, pop right in, and it's done. Just like that. Now if you could run around it, you know, pry it back really gently with something smooth and make sure that skirt's seated the whole way around. You can tell when you look. You need to shine a flashlight in there. And if, let's say, a spot got hung up and didn't go in, now you could take something smooth and work it in, and that'd be just fine. But that's a pretty non-invasive, simple way, you know, diverging, God forbid, from the Toyota rhetoric, but works pretty good. Alright, the next step is to get these guys in. They have a name. It's escaping me right now, so once again, grease them up. Just makes the whole thing way easier. And there's one with a precision board opening, and then there's one that's a bit rougher. And the rougher one, the larger one, takes this boot, or It has a name, I just can't remember, so we'll call it the boot for now. And you gotta kind of jiggle it in there like a wet noodle. And now you want to take something. I just use the back of this pick, nice and smooth, and you can finish it off, shove it down there. So it's very important that what you use to jam it down there isn't sharp, because you'll go right through this boot. So you got that boot on. Now there's this little guy, same thing, it's got a little skirt on it, and there's a ridge in there to accept that skirt. Now that goes in there like this. There you have it. Now you're gonna add some of this grease in there. You're going to take your slider pins and install them. And I'm just going to put these on hand tight, and I'll torque them once they're on the vehicle. I'll just give them just a snug. So I'll just give it a second look, make sure I didn't screw it up, but seal looks in there good. Now you slide the sliders into their home. And you can see there's some ridges on those slider bolts, and those are going to accept some grooves in those boots. So you push her together all the way, and if you go all the way, those boots should find their home. If they don't, you can pick at them with the screwdriver. And finally, when you go all the way down, the excess grease will come out of here, so get that out of your way. And then there's a little plug that goes in this hole here, and you just push that in there, and there you have it. That's a rebuild caliper. Much cheaper than buying some offshore rebuild from your parts store. All done with Toyota factory parts, and the whole kit was about $40 Canadian, and the grease, I think, like I said, was about $26. I ordered these deflectors here, or dust shields. I got new ones. Mine were pretty beat up. These are not the factory fasteners, I don't think, but anyhow. Once again, Toyota purists, close your eyes. Non-Toyota bolts going on the caliper. Tighten those up and you're pretty much done. The only other points I can give you are I think you'd want to get a new bleeder. Mine I cleaned up with the wire wheel and saved it. It's a little bit hard getting parts right now with the world ending, COVID-19 and all that, so kind of make do with what you have in the apocalypse. Kit comes with a plug for the bleeder. And one thing I'd like to discuss that I feel is very important is these copper gaskets, or I don't know what you want to call them. Once again, the name escapes me. But some people reuse these, and I highly advise against them. And the reason being is the way they make their seal is they actually crush. And copper loves to work harden. So think of, you grab a paper clip and you bend it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and eventually it breaks. That's because that metal is work hardening. So every bend, it becomes harder and harder and harder. Copper work hardens very easily. So one crush, they're work hardened, and they've really lost a lot of their ability to seal. So these are worth replacing, if you ask me. and I would replace the banjo bolt as well, but you know, world's ending, COVID-19, couldn't find one, so I'm gonna I clean this up and I'll be reusing this. So I'll also mention, you know, obviously I've painted these and I had the luxury of glass beating them. A friend of mine has a glass beater, and that area around the seal, you really want to get the rust out of it. You also want to be very conscious not to sandblast inside the cylinder and mar up or pit the walls. So what I did was I took the old piston, and hold on a second. Here she is. You can see that damage there. Someone, I don't know, I guess didn't have brake pads in at one point. But what I did was I took a reverse rolled up piece of duct tape, put it on there, put it in the hole, you know, and that duct tape retains it somewhat while you're sandblasting. And by doing that, you can sandblast around the sealing areas here, clean up the whole thing, and you don't have to worry about sand or blasting media, whatever you're using, getting in that bore and ruining it. And obviously, you know, all the ports, input ports and everything, I clog them. I use plugs to, you know, same thing, make sure no grit, no grime, you know, they don't get damaged. So I guess that's the last helpful tip I can give you, and have a good one. Hope this video helps. You know, I hope none of the purists had a conniption or a heart attack or a jammer, a stroke. You know, I hope you're all okay, and I hope this is helpful and you don't make the same mistake I did. So, cheers.